How you doing, guys? It's Philip McKernan here, and we often receive, questions, whether it's via email or whether it's via Facebook or whether it's people on the phone, etc., etc. And obviously, we can't just open the floodgates to people who just want to ask random questions around life, because we don't have any context for them, we don't have any background with them, we don't understand their stories, and quite frankly, often they don't understand their own stories, which is part of the problem. But it is interesting, the questions that people ask. How do you get clarity? How do you become intuitive? How do you start the process of going down the line of understanding what you're here on this planet to do, for example? And these are simple, everyday questions, or so we think, but they've got a hell of a lot more depth. They are simple questions, they're just not easy to answer. And it's interesting that people look to me to answer these questions for them. For example, we had one question recently from a young guy who just finished college, is uncertain what to do with his life to some extent, but really he said, I want to do what you do. So I'd be interested to see what his perception of what I do is, but he wants to do what I do. And he said, well, where would I start? What's your advice? My advice is, well, never do what I do. Never do what anybody else does. I mean, maybe be inspired by what they do, be inspired of the area that they're in, the type of impact they're making, or not, as the case may be. But what's your unique DNA? What's your lens? What's your story? Like, what's the part of you that brings something beautiful and unique to the table? And my heart goes out to this young guy. I think part of the problem is that he's just out of college, and I say that with a lot of respect. I appreciate there's a lot of people that feel and still hold on to the fact that education is critical in the world today. I certainly don't believe it's critical, and formal education gives us a platform. It can give us something to build off, but what it certainly does, it trains us to look for intellectual answers to often emotional challenges. And I think that's a fundamental problem in the world today, is we're asking a lot of intellectual questions, searching for things that are basically fundamentally based in pure emotion. So I think straight away, I think there's a disadvantage there, because again, it's a very heady type of question and looking for a very heady type of response. So, it's interesting how, we often ask questions about what I'm here to do. If I could figure out what I want to do when I grow up, if I could figure out what my passion is, then I'd be happy. How do I gain clarity? How do I do this? I mean, all of this stuff lies within you. I mean, you're clear within you. You've got intuition within you. It's what's getting in the way is the problem. And again, no matter how many times I say this, people still want to look for the silver bullet. And the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges in the world today, is people just don't know who they are to begin with. Forget about what they want to do and what they want in terms of materialism, and what profession they want, and what careers or business they want to set up. The question I often ask people is this: who do you want to be? And they go, well, God, that's a much more curious, exciting question and possibility. But who are you now? And people often say, well, I'm John, or I'm Philip, or I'm Henry, or I'm Mary, I'm a mother, I'm an accountant, and whatever. That's not who you are. That's often what you do. But do you understand your story? Have you done a deep dive on your story to really understand the essence of who you are? And therefore, wouldn't it make sense that if you did that, the byproduct of that, the clarity that you're seeking, which we often think is lying under a rock somewhere, it just starts to appear, it starts to uncover itself, it becomes obvious, because it's an extension of who you are as an individual. And if you want to honor yourself, you want to be in alignment, you want to be an authentic variation of who you are, or an authentic version or an extension of who you are, then obviously the answers, I believe, are already within your own story, within your own personal narrative. The other thing is, and this is kind of slightly jumping, but it's within the same vein, is that I read an article recently, I shared this on an interview I did on a podcast yesterday, about, I think it's something like the top 10 things or 7 things, successful parents do. And you've got, my heart goes out to all these millions of people around the world, or hundreds of thousands, or thousands of people that read this article and literally try to take on these principles. And I'm not saying we can't learn from other people, we can't be inspired by other people, but that article missed one fundamental step. What is a successful parent? Because typically when these articles come out, successful people, they refer to successful people in societal terms, in economic terms. So these are billionaires and millionaires and people who have done very, very well financially through their businesses, and therefore they're successful in society. And the natural inclination, the natural tendency is to assume that because they're successful in one area of their life, they must be successful in another. And while that can be the case, often it's not. Case in point, I was in Washington, D.C. speaking a few months ago, and there was a very successful man at the dinner table. In fact, he's famous in many ways for doing certain things and creating certain things in society and in the world of business that you and I both use every single day, but you may not even know it. And there was two very curious questions that actually frightened me, like really frightened me, from a man on my left and a guy sitting across from me. And they looked at this individual who's successful on paper, who has a lot of accolades, has won many awards. He's accredited for doing extraordinary things in the context of business and so on and so forth. The first question was, what's the secret to an incredible marriage? And I looked at this man and I assumed he knew him for 10 years. Or maybe at some point he'd lived with him. But he made an assumption, because this man is famous and because he's well known and because he's been married for a very long time, that actually the marriage in its essence is successful. The second thing he asked him, and the other guy asked in conjunction or back and forth, was, what's the secret to bringing up wonderful children? Again, it frightened me, because we're making an assumption that because somebody's successful in one aspect of their life, that they must be in others. And my encouragement to people is to not define in terms of a vision statement or mission statement, but just to dream about, what is success to me? How do I define whether I'm feeling really good about myself, about what I do, about who I am and who I want to be? My personal gauge is often my peace of mind. If I'm not at peace within myself, it's an indicator that I'm out of alignment, that I'm doing something that I'm not. And if you think I'm sitting here in my little perch preaching about this, I followed and wanted to follow the success of so many people that I drowned out the essence of who I was. I lost my own individuality. I didn't have any idea who I was. And I was chasing goals and dreams and aspirations belong to everybody in the world, except for Philip McKernan. I would love to say that's gone, that's abandoned, that canvas is desolate. It's not. I still, on occasions in my life, find myself drifting to this place of maybe just reaching out and taking a part of somebody else's success and saying, this is what I want for myself, for our small business, for the message and the impact that I want to make in the world. But more often than not, I really, really sit back and consider and dream and sit with what I really am here to do, who I am and who I want to be. And I would encourage you to do the same thing. Thank you.